Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Monday morning, August 22nd, 2011. It's about 1:16 in the morning, early Monday morning. And, of course, this is the day that I've been looking forward to because everything gets back to normal, if you will, around these areas. My mom goes back to work. I get to have the place to myself. Hopefully up until maybe 5:30. Not totally sure, because we all know that first day of teaching and even whatever kind of lets out a lot shorter sometimes. So we'll just have to wait and see. But things do start getting back to normal around here, folks. But anyway, I'm here to talk about something that I was thinking about this because I've been watching TV. Not TV tracks, but tide tracks or whatever you call it in the dirt sheet channel on YouTube. These two channels, tide tracks and dirt sheet channel, where they get all these things from the Blog Talk Radio wrestling shows and PWI Torch and stuff like that, and they talk about certain things. And I was listening to one of them today. And it was a radio show with the Honky Tonk Man, a wrestling radio show that the Honky Tonk Man hosts, and he had JBL as his guest. Now you might be asking, well, what does this all have to do with issue 231 that's in front of us? Well, issue 231 is not just the subject here. The picture you're going to be seeing upcoming of the person I'm going to talk about is the subject, and that's Ian Flynn. Now, of course not JBL and, Honky Tonk Man. They didn't talk about Ian. No, they talked about somebody that a lot of people feel needs to be let go out of wrestling. Needs to be out of wrestling once and for all, because his writing of storylines for Impact Wrestling or TNA have been redundant, haven't made sense, and he's constantly, week after week, according to many people, trying to shock the fan base week after week, month after month, with pay-per-view after pay-per-view. And when I heard them talking about this, I said to myself, you know what? This almost sounds similar to what fans are saying about Ian Flynn. Now, let me explain what I mean. You see, Ian Flynn is constantly doing almost the same thing over and over and over and over again, and fans are getting tired of it. One of the things that wrestling fans say Vince Russo keeps doing and repeating and is making, and basically by doing it, making it less appealing and more annoying than anything, is the shock value. The lights go out, here's a new person, or this happens or that happens, and people are getting sick of it. Heck, a lot of people are blaming Vince Russo, and probably rightfully so, for Sting, one of the most legendary wrestlers and performers in the business. They are flat out blaming Vince Russo, and rightfully so. I'm pretty sure of it. Because even I find it a little bit ridiculous, but I always know there's a reasoning. But they're flat out blaming him for turning Sting into a Joker like Sting. It's true. Turning him into the Joker, if you will, of TNA. Making him go insane, lose his mind. And people feel that that is the stupidest thing Vince Russo could have ever came up with for somebody as iconic and legendary as Sting. I mean, on these channels that I talked about, the Dirt Sheet channel and the Tie Tracks or the TV Tracks, whatever you want to call it, channel, they get these little clips, these little snippets, if you will, of all these audio interviews that they have with people, or all these audio discussions. And about 2 or 3 or 4 of them buried the Sting Joker gimmick. And again, probably rightfully so, because this is Vince Russo's idea. You see, from a fan's perspective, and maybe even from an insider's perspective, Vince Russo is trying his, I guess in his own mind, trying his best to make everybody hip and today'd and whatever. And I guess by making Sting into a Joker-like Sting, that's Vince Russo's way of saying, hey, I've upgraded Sting. I've made him different. Now, again, you might ask yourself, well, what does this have to do with Ian Flynn of the Sonic the Hedgehog comic books? Well, I'll tell you what it has to do with him. Ian Flynn has been criticized for pulling the same kind of things over and over again. Ian Flynn, if you want to take a huge comparison, if you will, excuse me for a second. But if you want to look at a comparison, and this might be a slight comparison, may not be that much of a relatively like comparison, but if you want to look at something similar, Ian Flynn, back in issue 172, did what many fans felt was kind of unnecessary. Some fans felt it was unnecessary, some felt it was. And that's when he turned Fiona Fox into a villainess. That's right. Ian Flynn basically took a character which, believe it or not, and this is going to be surprising coming from me, believe it or not, I felt would be compatible in some ways with Sonic. Could be, if done right and written right, could have been probably the next Sally, if you will, if they wanted to go that route. He takes her and turns her into a villainess. And why? Well, according to some insiders close to Ian, close to Archie, the people that work at Archie Comics and on the comic book, the reason he did it is because the comic book was lacking female villains. Okay, on one end of that perspective, that's understandable. But on the other hand, you're taking somebody who was legitimately a character people were liking, a character people were coming to like and enjoy and become fans of, and you turned her into what many have considered. In fact, Jay Foxfire did a picture of this a long time ago. Many consider now a bitch. That's basically what Ian did. He turned a very popular, he turned a character like Fiona, who was becoming very, very popular, coming into her own as a freedom fighter and as an individual character, and turned her into a villainess, aka a bitch, because of the lack of female villains. Okay, again, on one end of the spectrum, yeah, that's understandable, but on the other, it's not understandable. Then the comparisons are even more so. See, like I said, Vince Russo in wrestling, when it came to TNA, and even with WCW before that, always wanted to go for shock value. Always wanted to bring surprises, do things that would blow people's mind, get people talking. And again, this whole shock value deal, all situations, or whatever he comes up with, has become redundant, and people are finding it, fans are finding it less appealing every time it's done, which, according to many, is on a weekly basis. Now, how does that compare to Ian Flynn? Well, Ian Flynn also tries to go for shock value. See, Ian Flynn likes to go with shock value by having almost every big storyline, or every now and then on a constant basis. I mean, Ian likes to go what is known as the death route and the betrayal route. That's what he likes to do. Now, I can understand if someone betrays the freedom fighters, if that happens once in a blue moon. That's understandable. That's great shock value because nobody would expect and see it coming. But the thing is, he's been doing it more lately than anything. I mean, it's no joke. It's no joke, ladies and gentlemen. He's been doing it more often than anything. Now, I know some people might defend Ian and said he hasn't really been doing it that much. That's true, but still, he's been doing it more often than some people want to give him credit. All right? I mean, when we had the Iron Dominion story arc, And that's another thing I'm going to show a comparison to, talk about in comparison with. But when he did the Iron Dominion arc, he had a semi-small betrayal of Nicole defecting to the Iron Dominion because she was under the control temporarily of the Iron Queen. That is until Sally was able to use a firewall in the digital world to break it, to break that control, and allow Nicole to kind of create a barrier around herself. Now, the same could be said for a cover of a comic book that I was talking about, that I've talked about recently. And that was the cover during the Iron Dominion saga with the question on it, Bunny Gone Bad. And again, even though her mechanics were slightly controlled by the Iron Queen, it was sort of a semi-betrayal, but a forced semi-betrayal. And the same could be said afterwards in an issue, which I think was 217 and 218, those issues, where you had Bunny reunite with her uncle, and basically temporarily side with him in the Dark Egg Legion. Again, this was very repetitive because it's almost like it just happened recently with Iron Dominion and Nicole, and then before that Bunny, the cybernetic wise, losing control of her cybernetic arm and legs, I should say. But then her siding out of sympathy with her uncle in between issues 217 and 18, people are like, fans are looking at it like, are you kidding me? Another betrayal or semi-betrayal story? You've got to be kidding me. And then, most recently, we had Jeffrey St. John do the betrayal part. See, and this is not even the tip of the iceberg. You see, when Ian first came on board, one of his quotes was, when he kills a character, that character is dead, and when he means dead, he means kaput, done, no more. And he's killed off a few characters like Sir Connery, Tommy Turtle, which most fans were happy about. And then a minor character that was sort of major in some ways, but was a major part of Knuckles' character in some ways, his father, Locke. He kills him off. Okay? And he's doing this for what? Shock value? He's doing this for shock value? And you probably ask yourself again, how does this compare to Vince Russo in TNA and wrestling? It's because Vince Russo every week tries to go for the same thing. Every week or every other week tries to go for that same shock value. He tries to go for shock value. He tries to go with shock value probably with this Joker sting. He tries to go with shock value by having Kurt Angle recently turn heel because now he secretly wants to align himself with Hogan because Dixie Carter didn't tell him about Jeff and Karen. I mean, these are all things of shock value. I mean, there's just so many comparisons there. But but again, folks, we're getting just started here. We are just getting started. And boy, you guys, you want to talk about comparison between these two? How about the fact that you don't want to acknowledge something that's happened in the past and you just play it off like it never happened? Vince Russo has done that in TNA. He's done that in WCW. He's played things off as if they never happened. Or he doesn't want to acknowledge it on television. You see what I'm saying? He doesn't, storyline-wise, I'm not sure if he's done it as much in TNA, but I know there have been times where I've been watching an episode of Impact Wrestling, and they just don't acknowledge the fact that this happened. I mean, they had Kurt Angle come out and say, hey, I've never beaten Sting. And then and to many fans, that's like saying, wait a minute, Kurt Angle has beaten Sting. You see what I'm saying? They have him say stuff like that. And you know, he doesn't want to, and this is Vince Russo we're talking about. This is Vince Russo we're talking about, because now he, and you want to know something even better, folks? You want to know something better? He doesn't want Kurt Angle to acknowledge that, but yet then he hasn't acknowledge it in some ways. But, well, you want to talk about something even more crazy. Right now, we got a BFG series, the Bound for Glory series in TNA. And if you don't know what this is, I'll tell you. Basically, you got the top 10 wrestlers in TNA competing against each other in what is known as BFG series to see who's going to get a title shot at Bound for Glory, at the World Champion. And right now, Crimson is on top. Crimson is on top of there. But here's what's funny, folks. Here's what's funny. Earlier this year and last year and whatever, they had another thing that was similar. It's kind of like a ranking system, right? They had that going for a while, and then all of a sudden they just didn't acknowledge it anymore. It's like it didn't exist. You know what I'm saying, folks? The same thing, if you compare some of those really don't want to acknowledge this kind of thing that Vince Russo does for TNA and Impact Wrestling. If you want to compare that in some ways with Ian Flynn in the Sonic comic book, Ian Flynn doesn't want to acknowledge certain things. Oh, no. He doesn't want to acknowledge certain things. He'll acknowledge, like I said, Kurt Angle a couple weeks ago did acknowledge that he has beaten Sting, but not by himself, not on his own accord. He's always had help. He hasn't beaten him straight up. He briefly mentions this, right? Well, how does that example compare to what Ian does? Ian briefly acknowledges certain things from past comic books when they were written by the likes of Ken Penders and other writers, but then that's it. He just briefly acknowledges it, and then that's it. He writes his own little situation. But, and you know what's even more funny? Want to know what's even more funny? He doesn't want to acknowledge something that many fans feel is canon, is part of the continuity, but it's way out there in the future. He doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that the Mobius years later story arc is canon in continuity. He doesn't want to acknowledge that. Now, to me, I can understand that Ian doesn't want to acknowledge it because it's it's only possible. It's not determined. It's like when a fan goes to the Impact Wrestling tapings like tomorrow night in Texas, the spoilers of what's going to be seen the following Thursday. That is a comparison right there, wrestling-wise to comic book-wise, because by having Mobius years later be canon and continuity, you're basically spoiling the fact that, oh, by the way, the Freedom Fighters did beat Eggman. They got freedom back for the world. Sonic and Sally are married. Knuckles and Julie Sue are married. Antoine and Bunny are married. Of course, they were married in 174. Everybody has kids. Blah, 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 blah. And this is what I mean by one of the biggest BS things Ian has done, because Ian doesn't want to acknowledge that. Look, I can understand on his side of things that, like I said, it gives away, what's going to happen, so it's only possible. But let me ask you this. Why would you even continue writing about it if it's not the future. I'll tell you why. Because it's a future. It's a future that you know is canon, but yet you're doing your best to acknowledge that it's not. And you know people like it, fans like it, because it's something different. But yet you don't want to acknowledge it, just like Vince Russo at times has events that have occurred in TNA, have wrestlers not acknowledge certain things that have happened. It's good Coca-Cola. But fans, again, we're just getting started here. We are just getting, excuse my language, but we are just getting fucking started here. And I'll tell you why. You want to talk about a huge comparison between Vince Russo and Ian Flynn. You want to talk about a huge comparison, a huge similarity. Ian Flynn, when he came on board, said he would never, and I repeat myself, never, ever add or adapt his webcomic Other M into the main comic book or any of the spin-offs. He vowed he would never do that. Just like Vince Russo and TNA have vowed that we would never have Hulk Hogan versus Sting or Ric Flair versus Sting in the ring ever, because they're past their primes. Well, guess what? Just like Vince Russo and TNA have gone back on the fact that said they would never have Sting and Hogan fight, we're bound to get that at Bound for Glory, just like we're going to get Sting and Flair at No Surrender. But in comparison and similarity-wise to Ian Flynn, Ian, again, like I said, swore he'd never adapt his Other M comic. Take a look at the more recent Silver story arc. There's an adaptation. There is kind of an adaptation in some ways of the story right then and there. And he swore he would never do it, and yet he has. And again, it's, to me, it's like, you've got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. Here's a guy that says, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to adapt Other M. No, I'm not going to do that." Yet he does it. And then you have a guy like Vince Russo and the people at TNA saying, "Oh, we're never going to have Hogan and Sting face each other because Hogan can't do it no more in the ring. He's got too many surgeries. And Flair, he can't really go that much in the ring anymore, so we're not going to do it. Blah, blah, blah." And yet they're doing it. I cannot wait, ladies and gentlemen, for when No Surrender occurs, Sting and Flair face each other. I cannot wait, Lord Almighty, to hear the fans' reaction to that. Because it may be a reaction of nostalgia, but it may be a reaction of, I don't know what they're going to chant, honestly, but I know it's not going to be good. But again, these are just some similarities and comparisons between the two. And here's the biggest comparison of all. Here's the biggest comparison. Ian Flynn has gone out on record and said he's a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog. He's a fan of Princess Sally Acorn. He's a fan of the pairing of Sonic and Sally. And yet, he's put that pairing in jeopardy again. He's got many fans guessing and guessing and guessing, and probably assuming and assuming and assuming, and giving in to the fact that the silhouette on 231 is Sally as Titan Metal Sonic, or as a robotic Sally or something. We don't know. Heck, you even have somebody on Ian's own message board do a little outline of what it looks like. I mean, you want to add fuel to the fire, that's great. Add fuel to the fire. But you want to know again? But now, you want to know why I mentioned this though? I mentioned this because a lot of people are saying now that Ian has secretly been, and always has been, a Sally hater. He's been a Sal hater. He's been a Sadie Am hater. He's never really been supportive of them. Yet he goes on record and says that Sally is a strong female in the book. But yet, according to many fans, he's putting her in these situations, yet we don't know what's going on. And he's making fans upset. He's pissing fans off. And how is this in comparison to Vince Russo and TNA? It's in comparison to Vince Russo and TNA because they do things that piss fans off too. They say, "Oh, we're in support of this. We're in support of that. Oh, we'll do this. We'll do that." And yet they don't. And yet they always find a way to not do it, or at least do something that's going to piss the fans off about the fact that they are doing it, but they're not doing it in the way they're supposed to be doing it. Again, I know some of you may be listening to this audio video and say to yourself, "That's impossible. There's no way. There's no comparison between these two." Listen to what I just had to say, folks. There is a huge, huge comparison. And now the payoff, ironically, for both men, is going to be coming in October. That's a big similarity in comparison there. Because not only is that a big payoff for them, it's a big payoff due to the fact that Bound for Glory is Impact Wrestling / TNA's WrestleMania pay-per-view. And 230 of Sonic the Hedgehog is being released that month as well. So these are going to be the two payoffs to what many fans will either saying is going to kill the careers of Ian Flynn and Vince Russo, or it's going to be the payoff that salvages and saves their asses. That's what many fans are saying. Many fans are saying that because they all have said that if 230 doesn't pay off with its implage of Genesis, if it does not pay off, Ian Flynn could be out of a job. And if this whole Bound for Glory thing, with Sting and Hogan being one of the headline matches, doesn't pay off, and if this BFG series culminates with Crimson and Kurt Angle at Bound for Glory for the world title, if these don't pay off for Vince Russo in TNA, then he, just like Ian Flynn, could be out of a job. I'm not lying. I am not lying. So, again, you may say that this video doesn't make no sense. Well, guess what? You look at the comparisons, you listen to what I've had to say, and you will definitely see that there are some similarities. And again, it's ironic that both men's asses are on the line in October. Both men's asses are on the line. And all I'm going to say is this. They mess up, it's their ass. They don't mess up, and they salvage their damn careers and save their asses by doing something fans are going to like in both areas. TNA, when it comes to Vince Russo, Sonic the Hedgehog comic books when it comes to Ian Flynn, if they do something that saves both their asses, then more power to them. But again, there's a lot of comparisons, a lot of similarities to the two. So, that's all I'm going to say on it. Give me your thoughts down below. Do you think there's a comparison? Do you see a similarity? Tell me what you guys think. Tell me what you think. And if you know, if you see any other comparisons or similarities, go ahead, post them down below. Do a video response if you want. But believe me, there's a lot more comparisons and similarities than you think. So, that's all I'm going to say. Y'all take care.